Fighting games are something I always appreciated from afar since I was a kid, but never really got until just last year. I grew up with Tekken and BlazBlue and Street Fighter and played around with a ton of other 2D anime games briefly, and I put them down after a few hours of randomly flailing buttons with my friends or my sister. I think something like this is reflective of the experience most people have with the fighting game genre, and it's a perfectly acceptable and valid one to have. At the end of the day, you're playing to have fun, and if you're having fun, you've accomplished what you set out for. With that said, there's a reason I feel the need to tell people to engage with them more, and before I make that reason clear, I'd like to talk a little bit about the FGC and its history with accessibility. As the internet and fighting games have evolved, so has the spread of information for them, and getting into them is more accessible than ever. Thanks to wonderful people in the FGC that do God's work, we now have plenty of wiki sites such as Mizumi, Super Combo, and Dustloot where you can instantly see what a character does, what their strengths and weaknesses are, some key combos, and often detailed explanations on how to deal with a myriad of situations with them. Moreover, almost any game you would want to learn very likely has tutorials made by actual players readily available on those wiki pages or YouTube. Now, if you don't know what a term means in context to a fighting game, you can just hop on Enfilement's fighting game glossary and instantly understand it.
Oh, I don't have the fucking...
There are also Discord servers entirely dedicated to specific character information, and they do have their merit as convenient places to ask other players directly about your character, but I definitely have some issues with them. I find that Discord servers are not exactly the best place for organization of information, and if you keep needing to join new servers, you could potentially reach the server join limit. I have similar issues regarding sharing information through character Twitter hashtags as well. If you're on Twitter and you've ever tried to use its search function, I'm sure you understand exactly what I'm saying here. While I feel both of these methods of providing resources have their flaws, it would feel in bad faith not to mention them, as they at least clearly show the FGC's modern desire to further the reach of fighting games, and I've personally benefited from both. This is important because for the longest time you could only really get a lot of this information by knowing the right people and knowing where to look on niche forums. Fighting games have their origins in the arcade scene and were always the strongest within that realm before online play began to be more common and refined. Although it's becoming less common now, it wasn't even until relatively recently that Japanese developers began to stop developing fighting games for arcades first and consoles second. Westerners were historically only able to have entry-level engagements with fighting games because of either a lack of accessibility or a lack of anyone else to seriously play those games with. What's different now is that with dramatically improved netcode and plenty of fighting games for console and PC that utilize it, there are plenty of games you can easily start from, and that combined with information being so accessible now via the internet means fighting games are now something anyone can pick up and more thoroughly enjoy. Guilty Gear Strive is possibly the best example I could give of a recent fighting game that does a good job of being accessible to newcomers. Its more narrow combo routes, ease of play on a normal controller, rollback netcode, and through a tutorial that actually teaches you some fighting game fundamentals all make for something you can just kind of jump into. Strive even recently got an update that added a new feature where you can create your own combos and share them online in-game for other people to see and try for themselves. Implementing a feature like this into the game itself is as accessible can get, and on top of that, it's still entirely driven by community. Developers being more open to working alongside and growing with the communities they've created is huge and something I'd love to see more of in the future. While there are definitely arguments to be made within the FGC regarding the balance between accessibility in the form of things like auto combo and limited options and what sacrifices those bring to the table, it's undeniable that these decisions have been instrumental in expanding the reach of modern fighting games. Alright, so fighting games are easy to access and easy to play with other people now. Why should you care? Well, I'd like to start off by giving you my own personal experience and expanding from that. Near the end of 2020, I finished reading Tsukihime for the first time, and I was really hungry for more Tsukihime-related content. On a whim, I decided I wanted to play Melty Blood Actors Gen Current Code because I just wanted to feel the serotonin of jumping around the screen as Arcuade. My roommate and close friend saw me playing it and wanted to play it with me. She's really good at fighting games. All I could do for hours was block in the corner and look for moments to jump or mash out. This was frustrating for sure, but I want to point out the way I just said look for. I was locked down for long enough and went through the same interactions enough times that something clicked. Because I spent so much time locked in one spot dealing with only a handful of the same situations, I was given a lot of time to not only get a feel for what my character could do and commit some buttons to muscle memory, but over the course of that very long first set, I could start to see things. I could see openings sometimes, and I innately started to vaguely understand the concept of pressure and pressure resets. I didn't win a single round, let alone a single match, but it didn't matter. I had fun because I started to think about the game a bit differently, even if it was only a few basic principles. After this experience, I immediately realized how fun I found the learning and improving aspect of it. I decided for the first time in my life to look at a character's wiki page and learn a few basic combos. For the first time, I was actively motivated to seek improvement at a fighting game on my own time. For months following, I played around with a ton of characters in Melty. I became more and more familiar with its quirks, how characters move, how meter management affects the way you and your opponent have to play, the properties and pros and cons of different character moon types, and so on. It didn't matter if I lost most of the time I played, I could see myself getting better regardless of whether I could pull out a decisive win on someone or not. Even if it was for a doujin fighting game from 2011 that I had to beg people to play with me, I found myself just reveling in the sense of accomplishment that came from self-improvement and achieving small goals. From there, that feeling just kept snowballing as I tried different games and revisited all the games I'd previously just messed around in before that point, and it was a whole new world for all of them. I strongly feel that for me personally, Melty Blood Actress Again Current Code is the best fighting game ever made. It appeals to everything I like in that genre, and I don't think I'll ever grow tired of it. Nothing makes me more excited than when anyone of any skill level wants to play that game with me. That being said, what I learned over the course of the last year is that the experience and perspective you have with a fighting game in general dramatically changes once you begin to engage with it more. The experience I had with Melty Blood has probably happened in some way to somebody else with one of the many other fighting games in this world worth their salt. I believe there are special things that give Actress Again a certain level of soul that other games don't usually have, but that experience I described is nowhere near unique to it. That's just fighting games. Now, I would be remiss not to mention the FGC's historical inability to properly moderate itself until the last few years, but I'm confident in saying that it's never been a better time to pick up fighting games, even just for the community aspect, than now. There's this grindset attitude that community members have more often than they don't that comes in the form of a desire to help other people improve while improving themselves in the process. This is an important attitude for something that's especially competitive by nature because the skills you learn in pursuit of this are skills that will stick with you that you can apply to anything else you want to learn. Fighting games are a language, and as you evolve as a player, your ability to communicate in the way you play evolves. The constant back and forth of learning each other's habits, adapting, and then forcing the other to adapt to those adaptations in a constant loop is in its own right a conversation. And much like a conversation you'd have with someone with written or spoken word, it keeps changing as you both bring up new topics and express new perspectives. I think one of the coolest things about this is the way this allows for a lot of player expression. I've found that you can tell a lot about a person by the way they play. A lot of people have this misconception that you absolutely have to play a Street Fighter style of footsies, which in Filament's fighting game glossary describes as a complicated, often nebulous term that refers to the battle for controlling the space in front of you. While there are definitely fundamentals involved with that playstyle that anyone will want to learn and that you'll naturally pick up on just by playing games, you really can just say fuck it and do what you want. You don't need to know that standing kick is exactly -2 frames on block. You don't need to wait someone out for a whiff punish. You can get as creative and aggressive, or as some would describe Justin Wong's playstyle, lame as you want.
No, you're cheating.
You're gonna learn! This is the real world! You learn it early, son!
That's all you ever do in your house?
One of my favorite fighting game players of all time is the Japanese fighting game player Kusoru. There's this legendary set I always love to rewatch of him playing his sole bad guy against Steve H's extremely technical and patient Kai Kisk in Guilty Gear Accent Core. This isn't to say Kusoru isn't a very knowledgeable or even strategic fighting game player, but that this set beautifully illustrates how effective it can be to dance to your own beat even in a fighting game. Both Sajam and Kore Gaming here on YouTube, both of whom you should absolutely check out, have talked in deeper length about the spectrum of playstyles and how personality can fit into that. And I'll link both in the description for those interested about that. There are plenty of players, especially old heads before the information age, who largely play by heart, feeling, and raw experience, and then there are technical training mode monsters on the other hand, who can use their raw theory and knowledge to overwhelm their opponents. Any way you're innately inclined to play can become perfectly viable as you gain more experience and develop new skills and strategies, and I just think that's the coolest thing ever. Even besides that, you can get a feel for someone just based on the characters they pick and why. I'm not the best in the world at fighting games, and I am no absolute authority on them by any means, but I'd like to say I'm pretty good at them. I still rarely pick up characters for their toolset alone, even if sometimes that could mean I could win more. I have sat down and spent hours learning characters just because I like cute girls more often than I have done so because I liked how a character felt. I want to do wild stylish stuff with cute girls more than I want to maximize my win count, and that definitely says something about me. Just the same, the other extreme of picking characters exclusively based on their toolset or who you think is the strongest in a vacuum says something about you. When you get down to it, fighting games at their core are just another way to express yourself, and I think there's no greater feeling in the world than improving yourself in the process of doing just that. I feel that I've genuinely changed as I've continued to play them, and I've learned so many valuable lessons about trial and error and maintaining a strong mental and emotional fortitude for the things I enjoy doing and engaging with. Of course, it's not always going to be fun, and of course sometimes you're going to get upset with yourself when you feel that you've underperformed. There's no getting around stages of frustration with anything that you will ever continuously do and improve at. What's important, however, is that you can get back up and keep trying when all is said and done, and in my experience, fighting games are an excellent way to internalize that. They're a fun and exciting way to vent out your feelings, or truly feel like you have the ability to become good at anything if you try hard enough. And in a world that's so unfair and so brutal on our ability to feel like our individual effort is worth anything, I think that's truly beautiful. I wouldn't be the same without them, and I want others to try them out and see if they can eventually say the same thing for themselves. Fighting games are for people who want to be better in whatever form better may be. Fighting games are community-driven languages that constantly evolve as we do. Fighting games are a way to channel your thoughts and feelings into something that can help you better grapple with yourself or the things in your life that feel insurmountable. And above all else, fighting games are fun. This has been Emma Dreamcast Hime. Thanks for watching.